Welcome to the Joyosity Podcast. I'm so glad that you are joining us. Whether you're a seasoned leader or just starting out, you belong in the Joyosity community. If you are new to Joyosity, we base our work on these three bedrock beliefs. So, one, true leadership requires more than just surface level strategies. It requires a profound commitment to everything that makes us human. Number two, we use genuine curiosity. So you can create a positive culture with complex people because those complex people are the only people that you've got to work with. And that joy is the heartbeat of a healthy leader and a healthy organization. So we're putting joy and fun right in the center of our work. Every week, we bring you dynamic conversations with experts and leaders sharing more than a couple tips and tricks, but really the things that help you lead well, because we're building a movement with you based on hard-won wisdom, real-life experiences, and leading research. I'm Jenn Whitmer, your host, international speaker, leadership consultant, and all-around joy bringer. So together, we are going to move from ideas to action. And so get ready, get your multiple beverages, get your speakers ready, maybe even gather some Post-its because you're going to want to write this down because there's going to be some I can use this right now tools for you, and probably a little bit of that gut punch, a deep insight that's going to transform you as a person and as a leader. So today, I am so excited because it is our In Case You Missed It episode. And it's always so fun because I get to have my Chief Gen Officer and CEO of Sunshine Lane, Shelby Merriweather, with me. So she's joining us. So here you are.
Hello, hello.
Yay, yay, yay. So this month, we have been talking about conflict and culture, and how conflict is actually part of how you get to a joyful, productive culture, which always confuses people. And I still, and sometimes like, really, it's true.
Do we really have to? Do we really have
to?
to?
Yes. As a recovering conflict avoider, I still sometimes am like, yes, okay, deep breath. This is going to get me ultimately what I want and better things at the end. But I always find it a little bit challenging. So when I talked in my solo episode at the beginning of the month, so if you missed that, I talk about how conflict is the way to bring us to joy and a framework for the steps of conflict. And one of the things that I heard feedback from people is that they'd never heard of that idea that there are stages to conflict resolution.
I love
What have you heard this month, or what have you been thinking around that?
So a few things have come up for me on this. So the idea of conflict, yes, and the stages of the conflict were super helpful for me to learn from you. The other thing that I realized from Moe's conversation was that the culture is there no matter if you're thinking about it or not. But my aha moment from the conversation with her was I had a culture even when it was just me, when I was a solopreneur.
Yes.
And I was like, oh my gosh, like the culture has been there, even though I didn't want to focus or look at it back when I was just Shell. Like I still had that I still had a culture. And now it's almost it's hard. I know you spoke on this a little bit with that episode as well, of the shame spiral that can oftentimes catch leaders. And that's something that I didn't see coming when I added more people to my team. Like now everybody gets to see how Shelby procrastinates sometimes. Now everybody gets to see how, you know what I mean? Like, it's like there's things about myself that I know, my husband knows, and now my whole team gets to know about me.
Well, I think that is part of the self-delusion we have as humans, that we get to keep some of these things hidden. Because I mean, for me, as a fellow easy procrastinator, since you are the one reminding me of my deadlines to you, you are well aware of. So that
It's just so funny. I can remind other people. It's just funny being on the other side of it when you
totally.
say that. When you say that, yeah.
But that I couldn't hide that when I was 24 in my second year of teaching.
Yeah.
That procrastination still existed. And you could have asked probably even my students. It was still like they were aware. And I can guarantee you my students knew. though, so we have this idea that we can keep ourselves hidden from other people, but we really can't. There are parts of us that should, yes, be boundaried
Yeah.
and just, kept to certain people, but the parts of us that are just who we are existing in the world, you have a culture, you have a personal culture, and it's
Yeah, and
there.
and I just realized that as Mo was speaking about, like, culture is what how did she put it?
Oh,
Culture
I
is
love it. So if you didn't get to listen to Moe Carrick, we had 2 parts with her, and she's a culture expert, and she talked about, the simplest definition of culture is the way we do things here. I love
yes.
that. I thought that was so
Yeah,
good.
I thought that was great. So the way we do things here, and I was like, "The way we do things here, it's still the way I did things then, and now I just have a team of 5. We're
Mhm,
still like, I still have that through line of that culture's, followed me, and I'm
mhm,
now more conscious of it as I have different lives that are impacted by my decisions as a
mhm.
leader than
Yeah.
when it was just my life and my family that was impacted by my decisions. As a leader, I was still a leader as
Mhm.
one Shelb, and I'm just, like, it's just so fascinating to me, the idea that, like, it's always been there, and I should have paid attention to it then. And I'm
Well,
paying attention to it now. Thank you, Mo.
right, yeah, I mean, when you know better, you do better. Thank you, Maya Angelou. Uh, that it's true though, like, when I have worked with multiple companies where I take everybody and we do Enneagram work, or we do what I call the Joyosity Engage series, which is the Enneagram and communication and conflict, and we spend a day, like an offsite, working through this. And it is a truth among leaders that you've just expressed, that you can now see it in your team of 5, that it that at scale still happens. So we were doing this, I can remember one place, it's owned by 2 people. One is a 7, an Enneagram 7, and one is an Enneagram 9. So if you've never used the Enneagram before, it's a personality framework that helps you understand why you think, act, and feel the way you do. And it's by numbers. So we went around the room and everybody went to their spots around the room for where they were. And there's about 50-ish people. And I just asked a lot of questions. But one of the things that I was hoping they would notice, and they did, I was so happy, was that the majority of the people were 7s and 9s,
Okay.
because the leader, you attract who you are if you're not paying attention. And so it was really funny to see that they're not a 400-person company,
Right.
they're 50, but still 20, or 25 of the 50 are 7s and 9s. So like in that area, and it was really interesting, and they kind of went into the same shame spiral. I was like, no, 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 that's okay. That
Mhm.
is normal human behavior. So now what do we do with that? That's the dig in work. So if that's going to be, do we need to have some culture ads? I never say use the Enneagram in hiring as a hiring decision, but maybe I need to think about what are some of the qualities that I want to see added to our culture that I can't provide in my natural way. So those are different ways to combat that shame spiral, because the way you do things here is just going to be you, unless you counteract that pattern.
Yes, and I loved when Mo spoke about, the entrepreneurship tendency, because I know this so well by different clients that I work with. The entrepreneurship tendency to get really excited, have a million ideas, and send them to your team, like, all at once, and even I think Mo even mentioned, like, she thought she was, like, scheduling them out for Monday morning or something.
Yes, she was,
Her
yeah.
and her teammate was like, "That's overwhelming."
And
Because
how brave of that teammate.
I loved that story because I have been on both ends of it, because
Mhm.
I have been the one receiving all the wonderful, brilliant ideas at 3 o'clock in the morning and like, "Okay, like, this is a great idea, but maybe go to sleep." And then I've also been the one who's up at 3 o'clock in the morning with the baby, and I'm like, "Oh my gosh, this is the best idea I've ever had, like, I have to write it down." Like, I loved that, and I loved that her teammate was able to say, like, "Hey, Mo, like, this isn't aligning with what your values."
Mhm.
And I'm bringing it to you. And I thought that just spoke to who Mo is as a leader. And
Yes.
it really for me was like, okay, how do I communicate the way that that employee did when I'm
Mhm.
on that end of it? And how do I
Yeah.
make sure my team communicates with me when I'm the one giving all the brilliant ideas at 3 o'clock in the morning? I love
Right. It was such a great story because it illustrated so many things. One, as you said, what Mo has built, like that because she has worked on her values. They're clear. They're not just some like, sure, we have values or pictures on the wall. This is the way we're going to operate based on this thing. And one of Mo and I were talking offline. I don't remember if we talked about it on the podcast, but one of her values was openness, if I remember what she said right. And that she has somehow intentionally, not unintentionally, created a culture where that employee felt open enough to give feedback that feels like conflict.
Yeah,
You're doing this. I don't want you to do this. Like that can feel like conflict because the limited resource is time
yeah,
in that space. And the differing goals are I want to get my ideas out. I don't want to feel overwhelmed. You know, like these that's what was happening. And it could have been really easy for that employee to just manage that on their own. But because Mo had clarified values, operated by them, she created a space where they could say, here's what we're doing.
yeah,
And I know that's not the experience of everybody. They're like, okay, Jen, that's great. I don't have that boss. Um, and there's still ways to do that though, where you can put the responsibility back on the person or ask questions of that person to get them to clarify or to consider another option. Because just like you said, you're at 3 a.m., you've got your phone, you're like, this is the best idea. You're not thinking about the other person, which is fine. We don't have to think about them all the time. But then how do you rework something so communication is better?
right.
That's really powerful.
Which I know for me and my team, something that I've utilized that way is call notes. So we make sure to have like a good check-in system. And
Mhm.
when you have those brilliant, beautiful ideas at 3 o'clock in the morning, that's where I'm putting them. I put them in
Mm,
my call notes to that person so they're not getting pinged. And
that's
when we
great.
get on the call at a reasonable hour of the day, I can be like, listen to my wonderful, beautiful idea I had in the middle of the night and like
Yes.
get excited with them.
Yes, it's such a good thing, and you have to develop those kind of systems that work for you and somebody else, and I think sometimes I was at a networking event, and it was about women in leadership, and it was the state of women in leadership, and, like, there's only, like, 10% of women CEOs in Fortune 500 companies, and what happens to women in negotiations, and one of the things that we were talking about is women don't tend to just ask for a different option. And because we're so used to that, thinking about that as a negotiation. So when it comes to making the salary request, asking for the promotion, there's not enough muscle memory of asking for something.
Mhm.
And so asking for a different meeting time or asking for a different communication style. Can you send me that in a Slack message instead of an email? Can you put that in Notion instead of just telling me or like this is great. Can you also do that? Like just asking for some more things that are helpful for you is such a it can be such a challenge, but it's really fine because most of the time people aren't thinking about you. And we
Yeah,
put all these stories behind it. Like you're thinking about like it's going to mean all of these things. No, that's just how communication works.
yeah. Okay, I did wanna ask you, this was, like, a very small comment that you made during the episode with Mo, but
No,
I
I'm
thought
sorry.
was so powerful. You talked about a teacher of yours who let you ask all of the questions.
Ah, yeah.
I have a little boy who asks all of the questions. And I want so badly for him to be seen and felt loved and all of those things, and I also want to be the type of leader who welcomes the questions at home and
Mhm,
at work, and I'm just curious how like, what did that feel like to be seen as the
mhm.
question a asker?
Well, I think in my mind, she let me ask all the questions. Like my
Right.
experience of that and memory and emotion around it was Susie Zamar, God bless her, let me ask all the questions. In reality, having worked in education for 20 years, I know that she did not let me ask all the questions. Like there is no way. There's no way possible. And so I think the thing that I would say is that what I felt probably wasn't that I got to ask all of my questions, but that questions were welcomed, and that meant something good about me.
Yeah.
Not questions are unwelcomed, and because you ask questions, there is a problem. Like, I think that is what I was really feeling, because there's literally no way I got to ask all of my questions. That never happens.
I was gonna
But
say, my little guy could ask questions till, like, literally from when he wakes up till when he goes to sleep.
oh, yeah, and especially certain types of people ask all the
Yeah,
questions. I am one of them. I ask a lot of
yeah,
questions. Enneagram 6s, bless them, they ask all the questions, all of them, and they're great. We need that. I think it is the idea that your questions are welcomed, that questions don't mean somebody's done something wrong. It doesn't mean you haven't clearly explained something. Questions are not bad. Questions are a part of clear communication.
yeah,
And because I think the thing that I felt was questions demonstrated my intelligence rather than a lack of intelligence, or questions demonstrated that I was engaged, not that I was a problem. Those were the things that I think she communicated so well. And as a leader, I hope that I do that too, that your questions are welcomed. Um, and doing it with a 3-year-old who is, while you're trying to cook pork for dinner, which was the best story. I think you should just tell it. Uh,
I will, if you don't follow me on Instagram. I invite you to, but I'm going to be honest, that is more like my play area, there's no work there. But I had posted on Instagram as I was mid kitchen prep, and I literally started the video to say how, I was trying to get out the door and I was doing a million things and I grated my thumb, I cut my thumb, and then my 3-year-old's asking me questions about pork and how where does pork come from? It started with him asking me, is pork chicken? And I was like, no, it's not chicken. And he's like, was this chicken alive? And I was like, no, because it's not a chicken. It was a pig. It was alive. Anyways, I start the video mid conversation. I think he's done asking questions. He was not done asking
he was
questions.
not. He was not done.
He's processing the questions. And at the very end of the video, he says, I was like, buddy, this is pork. And he's like, is pork the name of the pig? And I was like, I had to
Was
stop the Instagram video to talk to him. I was like, no, pork is not the name of the pig, but that was very sweet of you to think he had a name. And like we had a whole conversation about it. It was hilarious.
Oh my gosh.
It's
Yeah. But I think, I mean, back to like, it's such a great example of who our natural human curiosity, that if you don't have a leader that encourages that curiosity, it's gonna get tamped down. And
yeah,
I definitely have consulted or been in cultures where questions meant something different. They were not
yes,
welcomed.
yes,
And every single one of those cultures, the way we do things here caused problems
yes.
because questions um, brought clarity. Well, there's no clarity. I don't know what I'm doing. I mean, I've definitely been in a conference room where somebody was like, okay, no questions, right? And I'm just like, what? Just because you said it one time out into the air does not mean that's communication that's been clear. And so if somebody asks a question in that way, I immediately am like, well, now I have to say that you're wrong, even in order to have a question. And then my brain has to process, did I even have a question? Do I want to be brave enough to prove, to say that you're wrong, that I do have a question? And you have moved on.
Yeah.
Like, no questions, right? Moved on.
And there's
Um,
that conflict again, that conflict
exactly.
of, like, asking that, "No, I do actually have a question." That feels way scarier than,
Mhm,
"What questions do you have?" And
mhm,
people being able to share. Um,
mhm.
that's a really and that reminds me of a culture I was a part of, where Mo talked about how most leaders aren't waking up and being like, "I'm going to work to create a toxic culture today. That's what I'm doing."
I
Um,
know very few. In fact, I know none. I'm like, who does that? Nobody's doing that. They're coping.
yeah, and I thought of a company I worked for who I know they didn't mean to be creating the toxic culture that they were creating, but
Mhm,
it was so that, like, no questions, right? Or they had an open door policy, but don't
mhm.
use it.
No.
Don't you know what
Mhm,
I mean? Like, and that's very, very common I hear, where the CEO will have an open door policy, but you won't actually be able to, have that conversation when you need it. And I actually ended up challenging that open door policy and that was kind of my tipping point, realizing,
Mhm.
oh, this was just something you said. This wasn't an open door. This
Mhm.
wasn't, a welcomed conversation. No questions. No questions,
Mhm.
right? And I
Yeah.
was like, okay, there's no questions from me. I'm gonna just go and do my own thing.
Yeah. Well, and that's one of the things that Mo gave these great examples of how that feels to customers and clients.
Yeah.
Because when you can't ask questions, you're not seen, and you're also leaving behind if you're the leader that's not accepting questions, you're leaving behind the greatness of the people that you have hired to do their work. That's why you hired them.
Yes.
And so that is a huge red flag of a dysfunctional at best culture.
Yeah.
And when people say, that people leave because of bad bosses, yes. And I think in my mind, when I hear that sentence, I see the like a monster over somebody's desk, like you will work 80 hours. Like that's what I see in my mind. But that's not it. It is somebody saying one thing and doing another. There's a misalignment between their stated values. We call that explicit culture, um, and their actions, which we call implicit culture. Here's what we say that we do, but here's what we actually do. That is what makes people leave. Because I can remember the similar, like you can ask the questions. I think I wrote about this on LinkedIn the other day and did not realize it would be so long once I started getting
Yeah.
into it. That we all want to hear your ideas, but when I went with an idea, you you're just trying to cause problems or you're just trying to be important. That's the other feedback I got that was like, "You said if I had an idea to come talk to you." You know, like,
Ugh.
I don't so I'm all confused, and then I start to second guess,
Yeah.
am I a problem? Am I just trying to be important? I mean, I thought this idea would be really great for everybody because it actually doesn't do me individually a lot. Like, so you start doing all of this overthinking and, which when people are like, "Yeah, but what does that have to do with the bottom line?" If I'm spending all this time thinking about this, I'm not doing the work that I've been hired to do.
Yeah.
It does end up that way, besides the fact that it feels really crappy.
Yeah. And then
Um,
what future ideas does that quelch by not,
absolutely.
what I mean? By not even engaging with crappy ideas. Like, even if
Mhm,
it is a bad idea, if you listen to it and you're like, "Well, this won't work because of that." Okay, great. Like,
mhm.
that's
Yeah,
fine. And now I know I can bring you another idea. And
yeah.
I know for me as a leader, I have had teammates come to me and be like, "Shelb, why don't we do it this way?" And I'm like, "Duh. Like, why haven't we been doing it that way?"
Right? And you're like, "Thank you."
And I know Natasha, specifically my teammate Natasha, she came to me once and she was like, "Why don't we I've just been thinking," and I think she had been thinking for a long time that we should be doing it this way. And I was like, "Natasha, thank you. Like, why have we not been doing it that way?"
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I feel like Natasha's the one that we were doing something that was really important this one way, and Natasha's like, "Well, why don't we do it that way?" And I'm like, "That's perfect." I think
Yes.
we're
She
like,
is
"Yes."
so good. She is so
Uh,
good at seeing the big picture and organizing beautifully.
mhm.
Like
Yeah.
she is like the organizer. Like, her house is beautiful and clean and perfect. Mine is chaotic and like, it's exciting. We just all have different things that
We
we
all do
bring
the
to the
thing. But
table.
just imagine, so let's flip that, Natasha's got this great idea. She's like, "Well, why don't we do these things? Why don't we do it this way?" And she comes and you respond with, "Well, because we've never done it that way."
Yeah.
Or that's not yeah, we're just not gonna yeah, I'll think about that. That's a really different response than, "Oh, I see how that works." Now, she brings you an idea that doesn't work, and you're like, "Okay, what if we" but you take it and say, "Well, what if we could do this?" Like, it's the
Yeah.
beginning of something,
And
not
that
the
has
end.
happened. Like, sometimes we've
Yeah,
had conversations with anybody on the team where it's like, "Okay, that doesn't work because of this, but it's also helpful to hear you don't feel this is working." because that
Yeah.
feedback sometimes is really helpful, even if the solution isn't
Hmm.
helpful, the feedback that you feel like there's a problem in the system or something
Hmm.
feels hard or something like that has been really useful as well to kind of
Absolutely.
have that, you know?
Yeah. Well, when we talk about, back to that big idea of culture and conflict, those can feel like conflict. And sometimes, so conflict is the struggle between limited resources and differing goals. And sometimes you think it's going to be a big struggle when actually it's not that big of a struggle.
Yeah.
And so there are different levels of struggle. But if you have identified your values and you have been clear about here's how we're going to build this, because like you said, I had a culture just as one
Yeah.
person. You have a personal culture, the way I do things. Um, if your culture is flexible in the methods or the models, like if you're flexible in that, but I don't want to say inflexible because I don't love that, but rooted in your values,
Yeah.
you have so much more freedom to create a beautiful space where people can have this different levels of conflict and everybody feels heard. You get better ideas.
Yeah.
You in general feel more connected to people because you like when you struggle through something together, you're like, we did that.
Yeah.
And there's a different level of connection. Yeah, I think about one of my best friends and we worked together on something and it didn't work. Like it
Mm.
just didn't work. But because we struggled through it and we knew like we're gonna be okay at the end.
Yes.
That's really like, even though we don't work together anymore, our relationship is still really good. Um, and that's an important part too. I think that we build in a way that is really tied to your values, but I'm flexible about how we get that done because the world changes. If we were inflexible, I mean, lots of people went out of business
Yeah.
during COVID. Lots of people, because there was an inflexibility there of how to recreate and do things differently.
Okay, can I ask one more thing I was thinking about when we were talking about this, that like middle management position
Mm,
you and Mo
yeah.
spoke about. And I actually I was thinking about it and I was like, I think I'm middle management at my house. I like I have not been, how at whatever your belief is, the children that come to me, I'm not hiring them. Their personalities are coming to me as they are, and I have to make the culture as they come to me. It influences the culture, right?
Mhm,
So this
yeah,
idea that sometimes we're not in charge of the hiring or the
yeah.
personalities that come into our home, for
Mhm.
example, but how do we take that and make a beautiful culture being mid-management, if you will?
Yeah, it's such a great question. I think, there's all kinds of specifics in every different place, but one of the things that I think I know will always help you is back to that idea of identifying your values, which we're doing at the retreat. And first of all, like, how do I understand my own values? How do I know what my personality is showing up? So, because there are some people that you're going to work with that just aren't the people, they just have little parts of them that poke at parts of you. And if you don't know what's getting poked, you can't adjust for that.
And
And
I've
that's
noticed
super hard.
my children have little pokies on them
Oh,
as well, and
yes.
I
Oh,
love
yes.
them dearly, and they have taught me so much about myself that I've actually thought of it in, like, the other relationships that I've had where I've just been like,
Mhm.
"Oh, I don't like that person. Did I really not like that person, or were they pokey in a
Yeah,
place I needed to pay attention?" You know what I mean?
yes,
Like,
yeah, and we don't like that. I mean, I don't. I mean, I do it because I know that it's better, but
yeah,
it's
it's
not my
that conflict
favorite.
again of, like,
Yeah.
"Oh, there's that thing again. There's that thing I do that I know I do, but I didn't want anybody else to know I do." There it
Mhm.
is. Like,
Yeah.
okay, yeah.
Yeah, so when you're that middle manager, you don't get to always choose, you don't always get to do those things, but I come back to that idea of your CEO of your own desk.
Yeah,
Like, I get to be CEO of my own desk, and if you're running a team, You do have even though you don't always get to choose who is on your team,
Yeah.
you do get to choose how you treat each other and say, here's how we're going to do things here. And you can create a mini culture inside of that.
The big
And,
circle. I like that. Yeah.
and I have watched clients do that and people follow them when they
Oh,
leave or they move up. Like when you really connect with people and you create, like you hold your own stuff and you work on your own self and then build that into others, you're genuine. And people, that's why people don't want to leave just as much as people, leave because of a bad boss. They want to stay with a
yeah.
good leader.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're saying we got to do the hard work, Jen. Is that what you're saying?
I am. I mean, Al Gore helped us all. It's an inconvenient truth. Like,
Uh,
and then Taylor brought it home. Hi, it's me.
it's me. I'm the problem. It's
I said that to somebody today that I'm trying to figure out if I want to hire to do some work on the website.
yeah.
And I was like, I will be the bottleneck. Like,
Yeah.
I know this.
Yes.
So how do we build that into the timeline?
Right.
Shelby's like, I know that at a core level that you will be the bottleneck.
It's okay because I also get the opportunity to have other people see me the way I get to see other clients. So it's just been so interesting as I've grown to feel those feelings on the other side and knowing that like it's okay.
Yeah.
We're all human and we're gonna figure it out.
We
If we
will.
if we put the time and the effort into figuring it out.
And the effort feels at first so big until you see how big the payoff is. Like
Oh,
like the freedom of knowing who you are and like, oh, this is the thing that is great about me and this is the thing that's going to trip me up. I can see it coming. I mean, there's a freedom in that it's hard to put into words because it feels so ethereal, but it means that, oh, I know that this is going to be a problem for me before I walk into that meeting. So what do I need to do? And now I don't feel as anxious rather than being all anxious about, I don't really know what's going to happen. I might still feel a touch of anxiety, but I know what to do. And that's where that confidence comes in. And that's where that freedom, like that payoff is just so big. So big. Yeah. All right, Shelby, we could always talk for forever, but we should really, really stop. What is something as we continue to talk about culture and creating joy at work and creating positive culture, what is something that is bringing you joy right now?
mm,
In specifically in your work, but it doesn't have to be in your work.
in my work. I have really enjoyed seeing how my work has been I love how my team has rallied around each other during some really hard times personally, some growth in our business. And then also I've just had like it's been a year of growth, which I welcomed at the beginning of the year. I said I want it all, and boy, howdy, did I get it. And I got it in a way that kind of poked and prodded me in a direction that I needed to go in my business, but in a
Mm,
way where I'm still able to prioritize my family, which has always been the goal of Sunshine Lane is
mhm.
to give business owners their time back with their family and give moms who are working from home time with their kiddos. And it's been really fun as I've come into a new transition this past month. The joy in it's working.
Mm,
I'm able to pass some work off and I'm able to have more time with my kids and we're doing it and it's working.
I
That's my
love
joy
that.
right now.
I love that. Well, joy is about connection. It's that deeper sense of happiness that's connected to something greater than yourself that's meaningful. And that sounds really great. That's really good.
What about you? What's
Oh,
this
gosh.
month?
I know. It's funny. So this month, um, I've gotten some big wins that aren't monetary. And I think that that's been really fun to be able to identify them. And so finishing the book map for my book feels really big and getting talking about the retreat with some people who are really excited about it. Like they're excited to come. They're excited to come to St. Louis. They're excited to spend that time. It having the encouragement from somebody talking about being being willing to put the idea of a traditional publisher for my book, which I hadn't thought about, like that could give it a different audience, and that connection to people, helping them create positive culture, like that just feels really big. And it's like, I feel the meaning, I think, of the work that I'm doing. That's probably the shortest way to say it. I'm feeling the meaning. And that's really fun.
Yeah.
Like it's really fun. I like that. So I think that's what's bringing me some joy, like making some big decisions about stuff and getting them like, okay, that's the direction.
Yeah.
That's where we're going. That feels really good right now. That feels really good.
I love it.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Shelby, as always.
Thank you.
I love having you here. Right, everybody. We'll be back next month, October, talking about values. Here we go. It'll be fun. We'll see you all next week. So let me put my coach hat on for just a moment. Don't just leave this here. Take a moment. What did you learn? What's your next tiny action step? Share this episode with someone and tell them what you're going to do. Check the show notes for all the links and connect with us on LinkedIn and all the other socials, or just, drop me an email at Jenn with 2 N's at jennwhitmer.com. We want to keep this conversation going with you. I know your earballs have a lot coming at them, so thank you for listening to the Joyosity podcast and being a part of our community. Please take a moment to rate and subscribe. It helps more people join us in the movement to create positive culture with complex people. So work is a joy, people are whole, and organizations flourish. Can't wait for you to join us next week.